Hello and welcome to the next ReGen Ag Chats. This is the second in our series about identity, or how we're defining identity. And my name is Jennifer.
And I'm Nick Renison.
So in this chat, we're going to be talking to Marian Boswall. So I met Marian on the Create course, which is the Nicole Masters Integrity Soils work they did in the UK, finished over a year ago now. And she is a legend amongst people. Landscape architect, never really clear what one of them did before, so anyway, it was just interesting to hear what she's up to. And we're starting to have conversations about working together, her working with clients and me working with them from a farming perspective, so that in itself would be quite interesting. So Nick, what was the main thing you took from the chat?
Well, what I love about Marian is she was in a car. She's obviously a very busy lady, and she was in a car in a Tesco car park, and she was as cool as a cucumber about it. And the technology was fine, but it just quietly went darker and darker. In the end, we couldn't actually see her. But she's just a really calm lady. She has got a really interesting story. I loved her beaver chat. I loved the bit when she talked about intuition and when you kind of feel things. And she gives an example of when a farmer might know a cow isn't quite right. And it's that kind of, you can kind of feel things, which you go on about a lot. And I sometimes think it's a bit of waffle, but actually,
when she told you about it, you completely agreed as well.
Yes. I did. I completely agreed with her. But I really enjoyed the chat, and I think she's a real asset to have, like Alex the Gurkha was in the industry, and the landscape, kind of thinking of landscape and like how the clusters can work together better. And I think there's just loads of good stuff in here.
And I suppose linking to the identity, I'm aiming for this to be linked to identity, is the idea that her career path was sort of M&S buyer, wasn't it, and management consultant, but what got her to where she is now is that interest in gardening that came through family connection, and then just this sort of drive to want to understand more, like just curiosity kept driving her to where she is now. So it's incredible. Also shared a yurt with her at Groundswell, fascinating fact.
Oh, did you?
And I've done some wild swimming with her. So, anyway, on that note, imagine that.
And you have pretended to be a beaver with her. I'll say no more.
That's true. She might. There might be. Well, no, it's all completely above board. Whatever that board is, we're all very open to all sorts of arrangements. On that note, we'll hand you over.
So we are joined by Marian Boswall. Now, Liz met Marian at the Create course, and Marian came to Carbon Calling this last year, and she is the most relaxing, graceful lady I've ever met. She walked in, and we were in a pickle in the middle of Carbon Calling, setting up, and I just pointed her to an old churn, a rusty old churn, and sent her to Emma's garden, and she created this amazing, like magnificent flower display on the stage just in a flip second. So, Marian, welcome to the podcast. Can we start at the very beginning? Tell us a little bit about your childhood, growing up.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And can I just say that being asked to fill an urn with flowers is the most relaxing, lovely thing for me too. And I think we should do that at the beginning of every party rather than make people drink something and talk to people they don't know. So much nicer to say, why don't you wander around the garden and create something beautiful? I would always be much happier to do that. So thank you for welcoming me so much to Carbon Calling. And gosh, to start from the beginning is quite a long time now. So I grew up partly in Italy. I learned Italian. And when I got to school, I said I wanted to be an interpreter. But they laughed when they heard my Italian because they said it was not Italian, didn't know what it was, but actually it was Neapolitan. So I started again and learnt. I think it's worth mentioning, I learnt it with my Latin teacher, a wonderful man, Mr. MacDonald, who was one chapter ahead of me, doing Italian O-level as it was then. And that was a huge lesson to me, that actually a very good way to learn is to teach. And that he and I just had a wonderful relationship in terms of muddling on through. And I think when we did the Create course, it was a huge revelation to me again, which I'd sort of forgotten since then, when that actually to help people along a path, you can be an expert, you can be a consultant, or you can be a coach or a mentor. And there are all these different roles. You don't only have to be an expert. And I think in this huge change that we're going through, there aren't very many experts, actually, because we don't really know what's going to happen. Then I did languages at Oxford, and that was the most wonderful 4 years of, well, partly incredible mental masturbation, because if you're reading sort of French and Italian literature in these beautiful buildings, then it couldn't really be anything more heavenly. But huge imposter syndrome, because, of course, everybody else is much cleverer than you, and you have to muddle on through. So that was, yes, a huge one way and t'other. And then I didn't really have a springboard. Lots of people do have sort of connections and stuff. I didn't. So I did the milk round and I joined Marks and Spencer as a buyer because I was also artistic. And if I hadn't gone to Oxford, I would have gone to art college. So I went to M&S. They were recruiting linguists at the time because they were trying to get into Europe. And that was a fabulous foundation in terms of understanding sort of corporations, understanding commercial outlook, making money. Age 22, you have a £30 million department, so you're not. I mean, there are safety nets, so you're not making sole decisions, but it's big, it's scale. And then I was headhunted or poached, whatever you like to say, seduced into being a management consultant. So I did that for 8 years. That was really exciting. It's always a bit, I think, like looking through the round window on the Magic Roundabout. You know, you go to these, and I still love it. You know, if I go around a farm or a factory or anything, it's like, this is how it works. Wow, it's amazing. And then after that, you're thinking, okay, how could we do it better? So that was a brilliant part of career. But in those days, 1980s, there weren't very many women doing that. I was one of three in this huge company. I had friends who had day nannies, night nannies, weekend nannies, and we worked really hard. Like 20-hour days were completely normal. And I exploded out of that career when my second daughter sadly died. It sort of before term. She was born early and then subsequently died. So I thought of after that, I was like, okay, I'm not going to subcontract my whole life anymore. I'm going to try to live it and to go back to nature and to go back to my garden. And I'd always garden with my granny. And so I thought, I'll just do something really lovely. You know, I'll just grow things and it'll be gentle and it won't be pressurized. And of course, one thing came to another and I ended up doing landscape architecture, teaching on the master's program at Greenwich. And yes, fast forward. Shall I get to the end now? Is that okay?
Well, no, you're just so clever.
I don't know about that.
Liz, she's so clever.
Not clever. No, not clever. Just sort of take opportunities, I think, as they come along. And then what the exciting bit where Liz comes in and meeting you guys comes in is that the landscape architecture practice was how we were having a really lovely time. And we've always, so I started off doing historic garden conservation. So if you're following these amazing, you know, landscape architects, Capability, Brown, Bridgman, etc., there's no room for ego. You can't go in thinking, you know, I'm the big I am. So our premise to begin with, and I say, it's me and my studio, was to tread lightly, to be respectful, and to work with local artisans and to look after the land. It's always been to look after the land. And as our scale kind of got bigger and bigger, we were doing lovely things like connecting hedgerows, corridors, woodland plantings, looking after ancient woodlands, looking after floodplains, rewiggling rivers, understanding. It's always been about biodiversity. And then suddenly I was kind of looking in the middle of the fields, and I had never thought, and this is just shocking, really, I had never had a deep dive into how our food was grown, apart from a small stint when we looked at the management consultancy, we looked at how a particular dark brown fizzy drink was made. And one of my colleagues said, once you know what's in it, you'll never drink it again.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know what was in it because it was very, very secret. But then when you look into the middle of the field and you see how the wheat is grown and what goes into the soil before even the processing of the flour, before even the making of the bread, I was just absolutely blown away. And that was when I thought, gosh, our food is everything. It's our future, and our soil is our food. And we are soil. We are soil. We come from soil. We go back to soil with a lot of spirit chucked in, obviously. And then that was when I did a deep dive with Elaine Ingham and with Nicole Masters on the Create course. I met Liz, and after that, everything was wonderful. As anybody who has met Liz will know. And then, of course, you as well, Nick. So there we go.
But when you say landscape architect,
yeah, what do we do?
Yes.
There's a lot of confusion, and fair enough. Why would anybody know what anybody else does? So it's just like a sliding scale. So you could be a garden designer, and you could design a small, and I am a garden designer as well as landscape architect, design a small garden. You could even plant up a window box, and I'm not saying that flippantly. Actually, our window boxes are important for biodiversity as well. And if that's what people have got, then that's what they should look after. So a window box or a small plot of land, something flat. So a landscape architect just is a bigger scale. So a landscape architect will be the people that design the spaces between the buildings in London, for example. So more London, all the paving, all those pods, with landscapes which are on podiums. And for us, our typical type of job would be like a farmstead with a farm around it. So to begin with, we would have been asked to look at, say, a historic building, sort of the land around it, like a historic garden. And so we'd be looking at that and saying, okay, what's the history of this place? What's the geology? What's the topography? What's the weather like here? What's the specific microclimate? What's the soil like? What wants to grow here? So what's already here growing? And then how can we support that? How can we look after that and make sure that this is the healthiest, most beautiful place possible? Of course, you're also thinking of toys like swimming pools or tennis courts or ways to get in and out, drives, accessibility, heat pumps, so putting things in the ground, so boreholes for water or for heat, air source heat, all those sorts of things. So how can we create that space around a beautiful listed building, for example? One of the listed buildings that we worked on a few years ago, we created a 2-acre lake, partly for conservation, partly to change the whole light and the ecosystem of a valley, which was degraded sort of farmland, but also for water source heat, because you can put coils in this lake and that can heat your grade 2 listed building and swimming pool. So things like that, that's what a landscape architect does. And then we have always said to our clients, what are you doing over the fence? How are you growing stuff over there? How are you looking after your woodland? Can we help you join up your hedgerows and to the woodlands, and what's happening with your neighbour's land, and how can we join up what we're doing with what they could do so that we get with these wildlife corridors? Yeah, so that is the scale, and it's all fine. If we can never do enough, but then every single day what we do is enough. So if we're designing a window box, that's enough for today. If we're designing a wonderful several farm clusters, which is I'm working on a brilliant thing in Kent at the moment with one of my fabulous clients and friends, to join up several clusters and make what we're calling, he's named it Chalk to Coast, which is a big sort of nature recovery corridor. So the ambitions can be huge, but they can be just tiny. And it's all valid.
I've just got a question going back to historic gardens. So look, when you go into those sort of spaces, were they already designed to be biodiverse? Do you mean in the olden days? Was that, or is it that we've now got to put so much more back into it because it is more sparse?
Yes. So I think to begin with, they couldn't help being a bit biodiverse because we didn't have the means to control, if you like, nature as much. But over the years, we have become more and more interested in form and less in content. So I, for example, am working on a lovely historic estate where there's a box parterre. So a box parterre is, as you know, if you saw it as a crop, you'd say, well, that's a monoculture, and it's clipped to living daylights, to use a polite term. So it gets really hard for it to be healthy. So we, in that situation, would say, well, either we look after the soil, clip the box less, clip into it. We have different, I'm not sure that your listeners are quite so interested in how we look after box, but they might be. But it's to avoid phytophthora, which I guess is, the same for any other plants. It's how we can make them healthy or how we can mix it up so it's more biodiverse. So no, if you think of the Italian Renaissance gardens, the big structural gardens, a lot of them have sacrificed biodiversity to sort of a dramatic single look. So we tried to bring it back in.
I suppose it's also about control, isn't it? A lot of it was demonstrating control over nature, I suppose, and power, I suppose. And then from a capability Brown perspective, because that was all about, again, this is my sort of Janet and Jill version of landscape design, but that was all about trying to make it quite look like nature, but actually it was massively planned.
Yes, there's a wonderful comparison where they had a whole fight between the different factions, and Capability Brown was very rude about the people, the picturesque, who had it all shaggy, and his was the sort of equivalent of a Brazilian, if you like, who would just get rid of everything.
And then
you can cut that bit out if you want to.
And it's also the ambition of going, I'm going to put a 2-acre lake in. But I'm guessing
for us,
you're not
for
digging
Capability Brown, for us, yes. But yeah, I mean, you guys do that sort of thing as well, don't you? You just get the diggers out and create something, and it was amazing. It was absolutely beautiful. You look into this valley, and it was on a spring line between the chalk line and the clay, which is where water wants to be, but we tend to drain our fields and hide it away and culvert it and all the rest of it. But to actually open it up and let it be, and the light that fills, because of course the water brings down the light. And as soon as we had built it, we've just done something else for the Tattinger people at a vineyard. We put in a lovely, it's just a big pond really, a very small lake. And the day it began filling, it brought in swallows and all the dragonflies and the swifts, and it's just amazing.
But I think, Liz, when we're kind of planting hedges and doing riparian strips and stuff, in a way, we're kind of doing this, but I don't think a farmer would think of it as it. I think it would be, we think of it differently.
And
yeah, you are, totally.
And it's also, I suppose, sometimes the challenge I think is that we're doing it. Where is the overview? Do you mean, wouldn't it be nice if we are, whether it's a permaculture approach or a landscape architect approach? So where is the overview? Or we just go, well, I think a hedge is fine here. So
and that's where getting the
both
map
of them are valid,
really.
isn't it? But actually, because we were debating today, actually, in terms of having a hedgerow plan, it's like, well, we just put hedges in and we cut them
but actually what is the plan of leaving some to go long and some to cut? And
yeah. And we are great. I mean, I loved, the Scottish National Archive. If you put your land up against the historic land and see, you can get them side by side, most brilliant rabbit hole, and you can see where your hedgerows all used to be. And that's an amazing asset, because of course they were mostly planted for a really good reason. So we've worked with people. We worked at Charleston Farmhouse, the Bloomsbury group, where Vanessa Bell and Virginia Woolf and everybody hung out in the wall. And there we wanted to put in a sort of car park, actually, for many reasons. I don't need to worry why. But we saw an old hogs pit, and we were able to recreate that whole sort of tapestry. So it now looks and feels just as it should have done, but also creates those amazing wildlife corridors. But because people walked the land, and you guys probably too, because they walked the land and understood every bit of it, it tended to be put in the place where it was needed.
Mm.
And to differentiate between land types and all sorts, wasn't it? In terms of just ripped out with great abandon. And
yes.
then my other question was about, you mentioned spirit. Maybe we're too early to go into land healing.
No, but I know that's where you want to go, Liz. Let's go.
Only that Nick always thinks I've gone woo-woo, because I always go to the Oxford Real Farming Conference and go to the slightly strange, not strange, in my normal world, slightly strange sessions, which is all about elementals and how do we use sort of connect with the land on a spiritual level. So I know you're doing some of that already within your practice.
Yes. So actually, I listened to a lovely John Kempf interview in one of his Ask Me Anythings, and somebody asked him how he connects with this, how he brings his spiritual side in, and his answer was so spot on that I'm going to quote him, because I know a lot of people will find that easier to digest to begin with, and then I'll tell you my bit as well. But he said that when a farmer goes into a field and looks at a cow and says there's something up with that cow, but nobody else could see it, that is tapping into your intuition and your understanding of greater than the purely scientific. You can't exactly put your finger on it, but you know there's something up. Same as if you went into a field and there was some of the crops were slightly odd in one patch, you might again say there's something odd in that patch. And you would follow it up with some investigation. And you might take, soil tests or sap tests or whatever, dig a hole. And similarly with the cow, you might do all those sorts of tests. I'm not going to tell you how to do that bit. But so that is the basis of land energy for me. I go onto a site and I can feel whether it's happy, whether it's unhappy. Sometimes I get a really strong intuitive sense as to what's up, and sometimes I don't, and I have to sit and listen and think about it. But you know how something bugs you at the back of your mind, there's something up, and it just through your subconscious gradually over weeks or whatever, and then eventually it's okay, that's what we need to do.
Can you give us some examples of those, Marian?
Yes, let me try and think of some. So you might get, and I'm jumping ahead slightly because I have studied Feng Shui as a result, and that is the Chinese way of rationalizing or writing down or picturing how what we feel intuitively works, for example. So you might go to a house and it feels empty. So you could go to a house and you think, well, where is the hearth? Where is the love? Where is the where do I want to be in this house? And you might feel restless. And in the same in the garden, you might think, well, this is fine, but I want to hurry on through. I want to be somewhere else. And in that case, you would say that the energy is flowing through too fast, for example. And you might even feel it in a physical level, like if you're in a wind tunnel, if I'm going to take it into a very physical thing. So if you're in a wind tunnel, you'd be like, this doesn't feel right. I don't want to be here. It can be the same for an energetic feel. And then what you would do is you would snuggie it in, to use a technical term. So you'd bring in some hedges, you'd bring in some trees, you would try and make it feel as though there was a sense of place. Or some large rocks to anchor it, or something like that. So that would be one. And then the other is when you get somewhere, and this is the same as, like a house. Say you walk into a kitchen and it's covered in plates and up to the ceiling with filthy stuff, and you just feel it's cluttered and the energy is terrible. And there, all of us intuitively think, I better clean this up. And it's the same. You might get to someone's house and it feels that they're too busy to love it, that the garden's not being loved. I mean, sometimes nature takes over and doesn't need the people to love it, but sometimes it feels like it's cluttered and they're doing too many things and it feels unhappy. And then it's just a question of support. So this goes back to what I was saying before, of just trying to support the land. So I don't go into a piece of land and think, oh, yes, this will make a lovely, I want a flat lawn here and a swimming pool there, and then I want some straight vistas. That's not me. I go in and say, okay, where are the guardian trees? Where is the water? Who is looking after? And by who I do mean plants and animals and trees and rocks and land, as well as people. Who is looking after this land, and how can I best support them? And it's the same on a huge landscape level. So if we go to a farm or an estate, and there's a really incised, fast-running, canalized river, you'd think that's not right. That's not how it wants to be. It needs some meanders, it needs some scrapes, it needs some wildlife, it needs some life. So what have us humans done to that isn't supporting it, and how can we better support it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. It's just when Liz goes on about what's it called? I've forgotten the name of it. Land
healing or land energy. Yeah.
Land, yeah. I just to me it's a bit woo-woo, but when you explain it like that, Marian, I get it now. I get it.
But for me,
there's nothing worse than a straight, like you say, a straight canalized beck up here, they call them. It's just, just doesn't feel right, does it? Because it's not right. But sorry, there's a lot.
And I think some of this is as sort of we talked about from the hedge perspective, is that some of this we have the intuition because we've been on the land, and we just think it's normal, and actually it's not. So you then speak to other people who don't spend a lot of time outside, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about or looking at or seeing.
Yeah, and it's also a bit of how we've been brought up. So there are people who look at a hedgerow and think that hasn't been cut for a year, I'm a bad farmer. I better get, the other people who think, oh, that hasn't been cut for a year, thank goodness the field fairs might have something to eat this winter. So yes, that is a difference in perspective, isn't it?
And I suppose the bit that we're interested in is, how do you take that, a potential farmer or person who has been indoctrinated in a certain way of managing hedge, and then then go, actually, we can allow that hedge to express itself, and my identity as a farmer is not rocked to the core, which is some of what we're doing not we, but nature schemes is encouraging people to change behavior, but actually they're paying for that behavior to change, and then when the payments stop, the behavior just goes back to where it was before, potentially.
Yeah, and this is all, well, you were talking about control, isn't it? I mean, I'm not a policy maker, but I can, from an outsider's point of view, I've heard some very heartfelt farmers at different conferences. One was actually at a literary festival when people were suggesting they were talking about rewilding and so on. This guy stood up and he said, it's just not fair. I was told in the 60s I was told to do this, in the 70s I was told, in the 80s I was told, and now you're telling me this, and each time you've told me I was wrong before. And it's heartbreaking, really. So my husband's uncle was John Watson, so he was a very forward-thinking farmer. In the 60s, he had pigs and he tried lots of clever chemicals because he was a very clever fellow. And then he realized what a terrible thing he was doing to the soil, not him, but what was happening. And he set up Riverford. And so his sons and daughters and great and grandchildren are now running this extraordinary force for good. And in his own way, he was also doing a force for good, but we didn't know. And I think when you say how can we change mindset, the beginning has to be with a support and without finger wagging. And it's the same in the garden world. You can get all these campaigns of artificial grass is good, artificial grass is bad. You were good yesterday, you're bad today. It's just, we have to have empathy and work together. We're all in this together. There's nobody who's doing things particularly well, and we have to assume that people are coming from a place of doing the best they can, and grant people that knowledge. So when I'm working with farmers, one of my favorite people, actually, he's a very, very clever farmer and a really lovely person, met me. And it's a good thing I was a management consultant, because I'm used to working with some fairly alpha males and alpha females with strong views. So this farmer met me on site with the words, "Nice to meet you. 2 things you need to know about me. I bloody love glyphosate, and you're not having beavers anywhere near my land." Good, hey? So
and what did you say?
I just smiled. I mean, he was, he's a lovely, lovely man. And you can understand why he loves glyphosate. Glyphosate is an incredibly useful tool in the toolbox, and we are only just realizing what a huge sledgehammer it is, and how much damage it has and is doing to us as humans. But in terms of yield, in terms of return on investment to get the job done quickly, you can understand. So what did we do? I didn't tackle him on that. I talked to him about soil gradually, and it's not my journey. I'm not there to tell people what to do, but I can show people. And we went to visit Archie Ruggles Bryce at Spain's Hill, and he has Spain's Hall. He has a wonderful beaver enclosure. They're still enclosed up there, but this lovely man fell in love. So that was nothing to do with me. It was just a question of seeing what good can come when you allow other species some room to do their thing and work with them. And it's not a done deal on beavers. I'm glad we got onto beavers, particularly as you haven't even asked me about them. So glad we got onto that. Glad we got onto that, Liz. But the amazing thing about that trust in another species is to allow something other than just the human to do what it's really good at within our own limits, because we are a selfish species, and that's fair enough. We want to be top human as opposed to top dog. So when the beavers are cutting down the trees that we don't want them to cut down, we need to protect them. And there's a wonderful way of doing this in Bavaria, where they have beaver wardens, and the beaver wardens liaise between farmers and beavers, and they explain not only what the beavers are doing and show people what they're doing, but they also step in when there's a problem. So they have a license to move beavers, to euthanize or cull beavers, to trap them. Yeah. So they are able to make sure that it's not an uncontrollable threat. Because, you guys are the farmers, you know that you've got the weather, you've got the government, you've got the supermarkets. The last thing you need is some blooming rodents on your land out of control. So
we might just need to take a couple of steps back with you. Where does your love affair with a beaver start? Rodent.
Okay, my beaver rodent. Where does the okay? It starts from the excitement that we can step back from the brink as a human species, because 400 years ago we extirpated all beavers in the UK. No, that's not true. They still had them in Scotland, but in England we ate them all.
Ate them?
Yes, you were allowed to eat them on Fridays because they counted as fish. We used their sweat glands, their anal sweat glands, charmingly for perfume. Nice, eh?
Really?
Yeah. And the silicic acid, which they because they eat willow, so it was used as medicine. And of course, we use their furs for hats and so on, the classic beaver hat, because it's incredibly warm and water repellent. So, we probably also got a bit annoyed with them for eating trees, but they and some people think they eat fish. They are completely vegetarian. They only eat trees, but they also eat things like Himalayan balsam, which is quite useful. And they just do an incredible job of cleaning up water and creating these beautiful wetlands and holding water in the land. So why do I love them? I love them because you can see, if you look again from the air, you can see not only the good that they've done in their little patch, bringing in loads of different species, birds, insects, all the rest of it, locking up carbon, holding on to water. But if you look at the fields around, they raise the water table in those fields around, so that those fields in times of drought don't dry out and die as well. So in our sort of times of extreme weather, which we are having a bit more of, it's fabulous to have this balance, this sort of equalizer, if you like, of some of these extremes. So that's partly why I love them, because they're so clever. I mean, it's amazing. You go to bed and in the morning, it's like the elves and the shoemaker. There they are all night, beavering away, ha, ha, ha. And they create these dams and you come out in the morning and they've done this amazing work. Yeah.
I didn't realise, because I went on Marian was leading a retreat down in Somerset. So myself and Chris went along. And what was particularly peculiar about it, I'd never been in a landscape in the UK with an animal that I'd never seen before. So you're walking around and you're just seeing completely different things to what you're used to seeing. So like their slipways into stuff and where they've chewed trees and the dams and stuff. So it was incredible.
And that's what I mean about we came back from the brink, and that just gives me enormous hope that if we can bring back if we can work with nature in the way that if you allow yourself to work with nature, if we can do that with beavers, then we could do it with so many other creatures. I mean, people talk about bees a lot. They tend to mean honeybees, but we've got 257, is it? 200, something like that, different species of bee, not just the honeybee. And they are all incredible pollinators and ecosystems engineers. Yeah, so we should be working with them as well.
But what's the state of play with the beavers at the moment?
They still need to be licensed. You still need to, if you want to have beavers, you need to invest in a beaver enclosure. There are some SKPs that we've got some in Kent, up on the river, not near me, up near Canterbury. There are some down in Devon and in Somerset, and they're doing amazing work. But no, if you want to have beavers, you have to have a license and put them in an enclosure still.
To be all BBC, to provide the alternative view, I've got a friend who farms up in Angus in Scotland, and they're having a massive issue in terms of land loss because of beaver activity. So,
yes, and the Beavers Trust, I saw something. This is where we need to have. It's slightly which is first. It's great to have them, but now we need to work with them so it doesn't become a fight. So we need to have beaver wardens. We need to have people who understand. And the Beavers Trust is trying. So yeah, a plug here for people to subscribe and give money to the Beavers Trust would be really good.
Well, we've planted a load of aspen in readiness for them. They like it.
Wonderful. They do. Yeah.
So maybe our grandchildren.
Where are you? Where's your nearest beaver population?
Would it be Lowther?
Yeah,
They've got them probably under license there.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a long way.
it goes with the valleys. I mean, they will travel, but they tend to go up and down streams. So if you're on the same valley as Lowther, then you're more likely than if you're up and over the hill.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. I can't see it happening here anytime soon. But I think farmers are. One of my sisters lives up in Scotland, and they're very, like Liz says, quite anti up there. But I think farmers could come round. I think I guess it's a everyone's got to work together, haven't they? And
it's the infamous right place, right. That's the challenge is that where my friend is, they've been released elsewhere, but they like where the prime agricultural land is more. So that's the challenge, is that it's unintended consequence, isn't it? So you're trying to help certain areas of an ecosystem, but actually the beaver's like, well, I don't want to be here. I want to be somewhere else.
Yeah. And that's when we start talking about value, don't you? And then it becomes how existential a problem you think that the loss of biodiversity and so on is versus the loss of financially valuable land. So that's a question of value. And then farmers, if they are obviously need that land for their business, then they should be compensated with finance because that's what they've lost. But they are for the nature that everybody else is gaining. So yeah, it's not a sort of I'm not a beaver bomber. I know there are beaver bombers about, but I'm definitely not of that camp. But I just think when you go and see what they've done. And the farmer that I'm talking about, he hasn't said, right, I want to have them on my land. He's just said, oh, my God, that is incredible. That is just awe-inspiring to see what's possible. And I'll just tell you one more. We probably shouldn't spend the whole time on beavers. But when I went on a beaver management course in Bavaria, because of this very question, you can't go around saying what a wonderful thing they are if you don't know what the consequences are. But one of the consequences there, which was quite extraordinary, was there was a confluence of 3 watersheds and below it a village. And the village, years ago, had a quote to put up a new dam, which was going to cost them €3 million. But by complete chance, some beavers moved into the wet woodland at the confluence of these 3 watersheds, and they single-handedly stopped the flow. So the village didn't flood. And the beaver warden happened to be the mayor of this tiny little, village, little town, who was showing us around on this course, a beaver management course. And he said that a guy moved in next door who was a fish farmer who didn't understand that beavers don't eat fish. And he got a bee in his bonnet about the beavers, and he broke their dams often enough for them to leave. And the next time there was a massive rain, this beaver warden, also the mayor, went round to the townspeople saying, guys, you need to get your sandbags out. We are going to have a major flood. You know, it's raining. We don't have the beavers anymore. It's going to be a lot of rain. And people slightly poo-pooed him. But of course, they were up to their necks. He's got photographs of it in water. The water just came gushing down the mountain. It was no longer held back by the free rodent population. And so now when we went there, they were now having a dam put in for €9 million because, of course, the prices have gone up. So that, for me, is just a classic. It wasn't very many annoying rodents. It wasn't a very big patch of land, but the cost benefit. And if you talk to Archie Ruggles-Bryce as well up at Space Hall, he will tell you the amazing work. He's working with insurers for pinching field below him and the water companies. Anyway, that must be enough.
I guess, Liz, your chap in Scotland, your mate, if they're growing crops for alcohol, for example, if they are, there's that kind of, do we need to grow crops to produce alcohol, or do we need to stop the houses in the town flooding? Is that...
Yeah, and it is the trade-off element always, isn't it? There is no, the perfect solution doesn't exist. It's just, I suppose we're always trying to push all the biodiversity to the worst land because we want to keep the prime agricultural land as it is. But the beavers obviously are choosing something else.
Yeah, and maybe there's a way of guiding them. I don't know enough about them, but perhaps there is. And that's the kind of thing we need to be studying, really. Adam Puttock down in Exeter University is doing amazing work studying, and obviously Roisin with Derek Gow, incredible work understanding what they need, what they want. Yeah.
And because it's interesting because I do a bit of work at Doddington, the Wilding site, sorry, near Lincoln, and they've just invested quite a lot of money in a re-wetting project.
Yeah.
And obviously, is it the sort of thing that in the future that if you employed some beavers to go and do that work for you, you would do it cheaper. But
yeah,
well, they've done it with some diggers, so we'll see. But the hope is that they're generating a landscape that in time beavers would be in an enclosure, but they don't at the moment. They don't have enough feeds for them.
Yeah, and I think it's like being that. I think so. If we take a step back again from just bringing in beavers willy nilly, if we can be human beavers and slow the flow, and then that is a huge benefit to the land. And I'm sure that's what you're doing on many of your sites as well. So yes, you can't always leap to the sort of extremes. And food is as important, it's really important to obviously to grow food as well as make money and to rewild and everything. So other work that we're doing involves scrapes and, beaver-like dams really. And is that what you're doing as well at Doddington?
Yeah, they're breaking field drains and also sort of blocking streams. So basically just holding the water for longer. But also they're seeing it as a potential fire break. So it's to the west of the hall. So it also creates a wet, and in a dry bit of England, it creates a place where it wouldn't, if there was grass fires or something, it potentially would stop it before it gets to the hall.
Really important. And with extreme weather, fire is, I know in America they have these issues, but we work in the south of France, and you're actually not allowed to plant within a certain area of normal houses because of fire. One of the National Trust places we're working with in sort of the east of England, where it's drier, similarly they have a fire strategy because it is, as you're saying, it is another thing that we need to think of in terms of extremes of weather.
The last 2 points on beavers. I pretended to be a beaver in the crate course for Marian's. So yeah, that's our connection. And the second thing on this beaver retreat, I got up at 7 o'clock in the morning to stand on the side of a bank waiting for a beaver to come, and I'm convinced I saw one for about a millisecond. They're not the best things to go and do tourism with. Just putting it. But I did see one.
Yes. Well, you were the best ever beaver actor I could ever ask for. Thank you.
It involved being very very cautious and slightly mean. Fits right in.
I seem to remember you whopping people with large bits of willow.
Yeah.
I was so Nicole's brilliant at telling people, at explaining that you shouldn't just tell people stuff, you should demonstrate it. So my brilliant idea was to demonstrate what it was like to be a beaver when people were trying to come and watch you. Yes, so Liz did it brilliantly.
At the beginning, you talked about this idea of coaching and mentoring, and with your farmer who wanted glyphosate and no beavers. But within your role, you've always done quite a lot of coaching or supporting. But I'm guessing people come to you because they're already on a turn. You're not having to try and convince them.
Well, it's a kind of a mutual choice. So people will come to us asking for a garden design. And they might only want a garden design, but that's when we will say, and what are you doing over the hedge? And then if there's an open door there, then we will, if people are interested, we will love to work with them. If people are absolutely not interested, some people still want an AstroTurf lawn and a tennis court and a swimming pool and some lavender, and that's kind of not our ideal client. And we, more to the point, are not their ideal landscape architects. So then that would be we wouldn't choose to work with them, and they shouldn't choose to work with us. But if we work with somebody who is interested, then we can learn together. So yes, that's when the balance between we have lots of expertise which we can share, but also the coaching and the mentoring. And because of my background in management consultancy and so on, and some of the other kind of more touchy-feely work I have done and coaching, then I'm able to lead people. It's like family office stuff to help them make decisions about how they want to work with their farm. So if you've done strategic work for companies, as I have, then bringing that to a farm business is possible.
And these are really long-term relationships, I'm thinking, like decades long. You're looking, yeah.
Yeah, well, a decade. No, some of them will be a couple of decades. And they're amazing people. I mean, it's an incredible privilege. So I get to support people who are doing such good. And that's really what gets me out of bed in the morning, the ripples. So if I can make a place, if I can help somebody else make a place with that supports them in what they're doing, then they can go off and do their work much better. So if we work with impact investors or philanthropists, the people I was with today are incredible philanthropists and thought leaders and so on. I'm making a garden with them. It's not the work that I'm doing for them is not going to change the world, but it might help them to change the world. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that for me is as important as the kind of floodplain restoration and all the rest of it. If we can support these incredible people in the work that they're doing, then they can have that energy and take that energy off and do this amazing work, which is so needed. So yeah, that makes me very excited, as you can probably tell from my tone of voice.
Mm-hmm. No, I think the cluster work kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because you want that kind of linking all the farms up together, the land, making the right decisions.
Yeah, so that's that wonderful man called Guy Neville, who's down at Burling, and he has a family farm and has had it for hundreds of years. The Neville family were huge, or still are huge, in Kent and Sussex, and he and I worked together, and it was one of those. It's not coaching, it's not mentoring, it's just that kind of conversation of, oh, what are you doing over there? What are you doing over there? And he tells this story, so it's very lovely that he told me about it. And then we were like, okay, so what are they doing over there? And he said, right, he had the idea that he was going to create a cluster of clusters, and it's called Chalk to Coast. The website is launching any day, and it's to bring these different clusters to Elmley, which is Gareth Fulton, who's another incredible person, and his wife, Georgina, bring them into this kind of huge nature corridor. And sorry, Tom, I should mention Tom as well. So the pharmacy, you can get this whole wonderful corridor of nature that they can get from A to B. And he's seen it. So he said that he was looking up and he saw a falcon. And it doesn't fly straight over the field. It goes along the hedgerows because, of course, that's where it's hunting. That's where it's safe. And so we need those hedgerows in order to create those corridors. So I'm hugely excited about that. Do you have that kind of thing up with you, Nick?
Well, what we've tried to do, and it's only because when we came here 12, 13, 14 years ago, it was just like a blank canvas. And we've worked with Pete Leeson from the Woodland Trust to kind of create corridors, and so you can get across and up and down. Because I didn't realise that birds like to pop along hedgerows rather than... I just didn't... Did you know that, Liz? I just didn't know things like that.
And the guys down at Wheel to Wave said that they've tracked with the turtle doves. They've seen them come all the way back up through the south of England to them along the nature corridor, which is the Wheel to Waves corridor. So that's why I was so excited about the beavers, because we can bring it back. We can support.
And I think it comes back quite quickly when it does come back.
In terms of the hedges, I know, because where down the lane we have hedges both sides, quite old hedges, and so you always see little birds like yellowhammers, and we've got a flock of yellowhammers and all that, so it's all quite interesting. But I just suppose I didn't think about the birds of prey following it, but it would make sense, wouldn't it? Or the field margins.
Yeah, there are a few yellowhammers, yes.
And I think it's also that it's back to that, and then you go to if I was fortunate enough to grow up in a place with lots of hedges, and then you go to somewhere that's a bit more barren, and you realise there's nothing. Well, there's something, but it hasn't got that 3D-ness, has it, that hedges provide?
And the lack of sound. So the Roots So Deep, the Carbon Cowboys film, when they just have one side of a wood to the other, or one side of a farm to the other. And the lack of sound, if you have no birds, is eerie, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah. What about your book, Marian?
Oh, thank you. My books are coming out in April, and it's called The Kindest Garden.
It's a follow-on.
It's a follow-on, yes. It's a quick sequitur, non-sequitur. And the point about the book is I wanted to take the large-scale regenerative approach, which I have embraced and learnt and been following, and is such an incredible movement for good in the UK, and bring it back to the gardeners, because we have 33.5 million gardeners in the UK, I think it is. I can't remember how many billions that we contribute to the economy. But it seems to me, if we're trying to, I love the last person you had on your podcast was saying how that you are influencers. But if you and we are trying to influence the outcomes of how people look after the land, gardeners are an open door, because they're already doing the best they possibly can in their spaces. And if you can show them how to look after land in order to look after soil, to look after their guts, to look after their families and their spirits, I think that involves as well buying from farmers market, buying Nick's eggs, of course, but really thinking about how they spend money, how we spend money, and how we make our choices of materials to build things with, how we look after our soil in terms of planting and so on. I just thought that was a really exciting way of translating or bringing together my two or more worlds, really. So the large scale, the smaller scale, and how to look after ourselves. So the reason it's called The Kindest Garden is that I think that nurturing the land is the kindest thing we can do for ourselves. So if we can be in tune, back to that intuition thing, if we can walk the land, if we can listen to the land, if we can listen to our guts, listen to our intuition, then the world will be a much happier place.
And what's it called? The
Kindest Garden.
The Kindest Garden.
Yeah.
And it's out now?
April the 10th. April the 10th. Yeah. Very soon. Yes. Coming to a bookshop near you.
It's just the depth of all the amount of information that you're getting across to people in a nice way, or trying, as you say, just trying to get more people to think intentionally, aren't they, in terms of what they're up to.
I was really inspired by Nicole's master's book, For the Love of Soil. When I came across that book, I was just I had to, I listened to it because I was driving a lot, but I had to repeat the bits when she's explaining all of the different protozoa and the nematodes and everything, because it was all new to me. I was like, what? This really happens? And it was so exciting. It was this whole new world. And so I wanted to allow people to experience that level of knowledge without dumbing down. Often like in a gardening book, you're just showing the glossy pictures and you're not taken down into depth. So I thought I want to trust that my reader is interested and is able to follow this. And of course they are. Science just means to know. Scary in Latin just means to know. So a little bit of science. There's a little bit of woo at the back just for you, Nick. Tells you how to use your dowsing rods to find water and land energy lines and that kind of stuff, all that kind of stuff. And I love the fact that, water engineers use dowsing rods. So these are things which are not totally understood. But if they're useful, why don't we just use them? Mm-hmm. So that's my kind of take on that. And then it tells you how to measure bricks. And so it's got quite a lot of little bits of science in there as well. But it also tells you how to do planting plans for specific types of soil, different archetypes.
I remember that. Do you remember the first course we went to Althorpe with Nicole, Nick? And I just remember sitting there with for 2 days, and you're just like, what? How did I not know this? And why? Like all of a sudden, it's just such an amazing amount of info.
Yeah.
Presented across.
Yeah, absolutely incredible.
But it's what's amazing is that I don't think if you're a student now learning about agriculture, food production, maybe gardening, I don't know. I don't think it's overly taught. Do you think it's taught?
No, well, the RHS is just starting. The RHS is playing a lot of catch up. So I trained with the RHS before I did my landscape architecture degree. And the things I was taught then I would not do now. But I think they are rapidly catching up.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we can say the same thing in agriculture.
No, I don't think that we can say the same thing. I think it will happen, but I think they're way behind. And all the woo-woo stuff, as we call it, I think that's like miles, hundreds of years behind. I think that's they don't get any of that stuff.
You said it's to do with it's helping people recognize what they can already see. Do you mean because of that experience? A lot of the time, the experience of being, well, I'm wide generalization because I don't think it's always the case. Just because you're outside a lot doesn't mean that you see in that way. But some of it is that using intuition. And I'm not suggesting we all have a little chat with the elementals, but we could do a bit of that too.
Start by hugging the trees.
It didn't work when I was trying to have a chat with them about my reseed. It hasn't quite worked as well as unanticipated, it has to be said.
What were you chatting about?
Well, I was just telling them that what my aim was for the field once I'd disrupted their world and was trying to do a new reseed. Some of it's worked, some of it hasn't.
Did you say it out loud or did you say it in your head to them?
It doesn't matter.
No, but which one did you do?
I think I probably said it out loud. I was also sitting on a tractor with no radio, so I was having to entertain myself in some way.
Well, I think that's very cool. I've been told I need to start to sing, but I'm worried the elemental might run away.
And I once had a chat with Marian and it ended with going, I've got to go and chat to a well. So
yes, that's true. I did. Yes.
I did then ask what the well said, and the well was quite happy being a well. So
yeah, it was a culverted stream. I was trying to persuade the stream that we were going to unculvert it and all would be well, and actually it wasn't that fast.
But thank you. Massive, wide-ranging conversation. And part of why we wanted to talk to you about this, people changing identity as they move through careers, really. So starting as a buyer and a management consultant, and now engaging or trying to get as much nature and support nature as much as possible. I just thought it was a really interesting story.
I think there'll be a film about you, Marian.
I doubt that. I've got a face for radio, but thank you for having me on the radio. Yeah. Oh, it's so good to talk to you both. Can't wait for Carbon Calling.
23rd to the 25th of June. We always do the plug.
Thank you for listening to the ReGen Ag podcast. Huge thanks to our sponsor, Tim Nicholson from Cactus Tree Guards, Renault for the music, and Pete Ord, the podcast wizard from the studio at Sunbeams, part of the Annie Mawson Sunbeams Music Trust. See you next time.